So how are things going with you?
Good, good.
Excellent. How's the new, because you just started that position, correct?
Been here for a month now, which is kind of cool.
It's going well. Everyone is happy.
Everybody's nice. Everyone
Nice is good.
leaves at like 5 p.m., which is very different from where I worked before, so that's good.
Uh, so let's talk about other things you have going on, because I know you were talking about you just started where you're at right now. Can you plug the name of the place, or do you not want to do that right now?
Yeah, so I'm working at Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program. And so we are in Boston's South End. And yeah, I've been here for a month now, which it's the funny thing about when you go to work at a new job. On the one hand, it feels like I just started, and on the other hand, it feels like I've been here for so long. Um, and they have over 40 different sites that they're at, a bunch of different shelters, and they operate clinics within them. And um, they really just go to where their patients are, wherever their patients may be within the greater Boston area. And so I'm working my way through and getting to know a bunch of those different locations. And I'm based out of a building here in the South End, but then going around and getting to know our many different patients and doctors and nurses and caseworkers all throughout the city. So that's been really exciting. And because I work in communications, it's literally my job to go around and meet all these amazing people, both patients and staff, and then get to tell their story on a daily basis. So I feel really lucky that I just get to go around and learn about the coolest things that we do all the time, and that's just my job. But yeah, I'm really excited, and it's a lot of fun, and I just feel like it's like Boston's best kept secret. And I've lived in the area my entire life, and I somehow like I knew about a lot of the shelters they work with, but I didn't ever really know about them, which is kind of nuts to think about. But I'm having a lot of fun, and it's I've been lucky to work at a lot of great places, and it's nice to add another one to the list.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad it's working out for you. Sounds like it's a win for sure.
Yeah.
And fits right in with everything I know about you just from the short time that we've known about each other. So congratulations on that all working out, and I hope it goes to the best. So I know we did talk about you possibly trying to put together a podcast. So where can you give our listeners an update on where you stand on that?
Yeah, so my co-creator has graduated from grad school, which is exciting for her.
All right.
So
Congratulations to her.
yeah, I'm very proud of her. And so she's, prepping for her exams and licensure and all that. And now I'm just the holdup because I was really throwing myself into my new job. And then also like just getting our act together on the technical side of things. You and I were talking about that a little bit yesterday of just we feel really excited and confident about the content side because we both have been working. We talked before about how this will be about sexual violence and sexual assault. And we've been working in that area for a long time, and we know so many people who have expertise on the various areas that we are not as well versed in. So we feel like between what we know and then the people that we know, we'll be able to cover that really well. But it's more about, just wanting to make sure that we're always both, the two of us are running around doing a million things and be getting
Uh-huh.
the technical side that we don't know as much about. But we kind of, the other day we're talking, we're like, I think we just need to say screw it and just start recording, even if it's a really crummy recording, because we're gonna like suddenly become audio geniuses. Like my brother
Right.
is an audiophile, and like we're just not gonna, like, he went to school for television and radio, like we're not
Mhm.
gonna go do that. So we just need to just bite the bullet and just start doing it, because otherwise we never will. And I feel like what we have to say is a lot more important as long as people can actually sort of hear it.
Absolutely. And I know just knowing you, the short time I've known you, but seeing the other things that you've produced, that no matter what it sounds like, the quality of it and you having all the connections that you have, the content will outweigh the quality of the audio. And the one thing I will say that I do agree with you with is the back end part of getting a podcast going and getting a show like that is a little more work than I think especially because I had never done a project like this until we started this, and we got it going really quick, like maybe a month before Handmaid's Tale launched, and so just seeing everything that it took to create the website and the presence online and all the equipment and the audio and making sure that was right was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. But it is one of those things where if you keep tweaking it and keep trying to make it perfect, you're never going to start it. Your attitude there of let's just do it and not think about it anymore is perfect.
That's the benefit of doing things on the internet, right? Like having a blogging background is like, well, that post wasn't as good. The next one will be better.
Exactly.
Just
There's
make
always the
another
next
one
one.
better. And then, maybe it's not so hot for the people who find you 3 years down the line. They go back and they're like, ooh, that early stuff is rough. But it's like, well, there's a learning curve. Sorry.
Exactly. So is there anything else you have going on that you would like to plug? Because I know you do a lot of things, and you are currently doing a lot of things with the new position and trying to get the podcast off the ground. But is there anything else in the minute amount of time that you have left in your day? I'm sure that you are also working on.
If anybody is not done reading about Wonder Woman, I wrote a few pieces on Wonder Woman. I wrote something about the gender tropes that we usually see in superhero movies, and I really felt like Wonder Woman was a role reversal. I love me some Chris Pine, and I really enjoyed him as a damsel in distress. And
Indeed, I agree with you on that.
He even got the like sexy tub shower scene.
Yes,
He's
yes.
really great. And I wrote another piece about, how they specifically used war and violence in World War I and genocide and all those things. So check those out. Those are over on Den of Geek. And I've been writing, I wrote some more about Handmaid's Tale, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. I'm writing about Orphan Black.
Nice.
Which is
Been watching that.
great women, bodily autonomy, the future, all these good things.
Neolution.
Yeah, right.
Coming for
So
everyone.
if you're in Clone Club, check me out. And then there's just some other shows that I love that I'm sure I'll be writing about soon. Winona Earp.
Do tell. Oh, you're a Winona Earp person too. Okay, you're the
Yes,
second one I found. Not that I'm sure it's just not a show that I've sought out, but one of the people that created something for us to give away, Kira, she is a huge Winona Earp fan. So like she does all this artwork and was one of the ones that gave us stuff. And she was like, you got to watch the show. It's very cool. And so she likes all the kind of same stuff that I do and probably that you do. And I'll be honest, the name of the show being Winona Earp just seemed a little cheesy to me, so I didn't check it out. But from what I've heard, it's pretty cool.
For those who do not know, it's like the concept is like the great granddaughter or whatever of Wyatt Earp. So a bit of Western plus sci-fi, but not in space. It's on Earth. And she, shoots ghosts and demons that she calls revenants. She is a booze swilling, fast talking, sarcastic lady. There's some queer lady love going on in there. There is no bury your gaze if that's a concern of yours. And it's a good time. It's really goofy. There's some real groaners of lines in there, but it's a fun way to spend an hour. Short seasons, easy to catch up. I think you can watch it on Netflix.
Yes, it is on Netflix.
Absolutely. Yeah, I re-binged before this season, and it was an excellent way to spend like a weekend.
Yeah, I know. It felt similar in concept. I started watching Van Helsing, which I don't even know if that's still on, which is kind of a similar concept of she's of the line of Van Helsing. I felt that show.
And doesn't even look alike, I think.
Well, yeah, kind of. They do. The Van Helsing, she's a little older, you can tell, than the Winona Earp. But that show I thought had a lot of promise, and I thought didn't follow through with it. Other than being one of the most violent shows I've seen in a long time, especially on sci-fi, I was really surprised how graphic it was. Especially they made a point of doing these intros before like the credits would roll at the beginning that utilized sound like I hadn't heard before, like in a disturbing way.
I felt like Van Helsing was half trying to appeal to the Walking Dead fan base and half trying to appeal to the Winona Earp fan base. And it really went after both and didn't know which, like it couldn't make a decision about what it wanted to be and wasn't really wholly its own thing. And it sort of lost out on both.
I agree.
There were a lot of where I really enjoyed it, but there were a lot of times where I was like, this is just like gut-wrenchingly disturbing and I'm not sure why.
Exactly. Exactly. Because the concept is cool and they do some really cool things and there's some really cool ideas. But yeah, sometimes it was just like the plot line was drawn out a little bit and you were like, why are we just killing everything? And why do we need to do this? And why hasn't John been shot a long time ago because he's a pain in the ass? But
after a recent Orphan Black episode, there was some violence that some people thought was like too much and too brutal. And a point was made of like Orphan Black is really intentional with their violence. If there is violence, particularly against women, they use it to demonstrate a purpose, and it is thematically and narratively important,
Yeah,
which is something that you guys talked about on your show, which I thought was really great. And I think that Van Helsing is the opposite of that, where it's just like, here's some gore and stuff, and like, oh, also
exactly.
severed fingers, because why
Yeah,
not?
yeah, and maybe I think you might be referencing, I believe, like, because spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it, they're like trying to make a hybrid baby, I believe, of some sort. And there's a lot of graphic pregnant women, post-op childbirth kind of stuff going on that is profoundly disturbing, which is saying something for people who've been watching The Handmaid's Tale. But this is like on a different, like unnecessarily and intentionally schlocky, gory, on purpose, kind of like a almost torture porn kind of way. For me, at
Yeah.
least, that's kind of what it felt like. And so I was
That part
disappointed.
was
And
really weak. And then also like the reveal of there's a murderer in their midst, and then who it is, and then why, and like his entire reason for being a murderer is like, sorry, I was always a psychopath. Like you thought I was a sweet person, which like could have been interesting. Like, oh, it's a deaf man, and it's like, oh, you assumed I was innocent because I'm deaf, and you projected that, which could have been interesting commentary on people with disabilities, and instead was just like, psychopath's got a psychopath. Like, that's who I am. Like, okay,
sorry to disappoint you.
that's his
God.
entire backstory. But he was loyal to the end. To the end, not really, because I'm sure that character will literally never die. But he was loyal to like one person for no reason. I don't know. It didn't
Yeah,
have at all.
yeah,
But it was a lot of brutal violence. And then I think it will only continue because it seemed like that character ended on a very vengeful note, which at least now has a reason because everybody's tried to kill him. But in
right.
fairness, definitely tried to murder them a lot first.
A lot of murder, a lot of attempted murder going on.
We set off on
So,
a tangent, but it was fun.
so let's touch on The Handmaid's Tale. So I think the last time we talked, it was probably episode 6. I think we had just kind of crossed the midway point. So give me an overall perspective from your viewpoint as to how you felt they wrapped everything up those last few episodes.
Yeah, so I was pretty pleased with the end of the season. I mean, there's definitely moments that I feel like if you've ever heard the phrase fridge logic, which is like something that makes sense when you're watching the show, and then later when you're like getting something out of your fridge, you go, wait a minute. There were some of those moments that I've had later where I was like, I don't actually know why they would ever even try to get them to kill a woman, because clearly they would not.
Right.
Some of those things. But generally speaking, I had a lot more moments where I was like, yes, I'm singing along to Nina Simone, and I'm really excited about this. I was really excited to see Jezebel's. Love everything about every time Moira's on screen.
Yeah, did
Um,
the Jezebels, because in the book they don't really go into a real description too much of Jezebels, um, at least the entirety of Jezebels. You get what's going on there. But did you think they towed the line there enough with it not being too crazy and not making it, like Van Helsing would have done it, and like, making it completely insane?
I felt like it was like realistic in that it felt like a thing that could actually happen. The idea, and I did love the sociology professor's reference of just like this strange mix of like, okay, some of these people were sex workers, and also some of them were just simply women who could not tolerate this world. Like, I don't know. And it was also like, here's the place where you actually see heavy women, and
Yes.
like pets for some reason.
The
Um,
dog, yeah, we brought up the dog. We were like, what's going on with the dog? And maybe we don't
I
really know
also
what's
thought
going
that
on with the dog.
the ceremony kink I thought was very interesting and creepy and weird. That like the one time when she's going past the room and she sees like clearly, and
Oh,
by kink
yes.
this is obviously not something that is held by any of the women involved in the scenario because they don't get a vote, but it's like a bunch of dudes in a circle egging on women who are clearly not in charge of the situation, being a handmaid and a wife. And it's just like, ugh, this is everything that's terrible about Gilead, like in one brief snapshot. And it weirdly reminded me of that Requiem for a Dream scene in the party when they're all just like, ugh. And I was just like, I hate you guys. I hate everything about
Yeah, it's hard to pervert something that's already perverted on its own, but they did a pretty good job of doing that.
I was like, you made it worse. You somehow.
And of course, we'd be remiss without acknowledging the elevator and the guy licking the girl's amputated nub, which was
Yeah.
brutal.
Just the idea that it's like, okay, so there's a world in which that could be a cool and interesting thing if that was someone who, was born with a disability and that was his way of like, I love your body and like blah blah blah. But it's like, no, I think the messaging is pretty clear here that that was something that was done to her as a punishment for her being a woman who thinks things or who
Mhm,
reads things. And that's
exactly.
him being like, I'm way into you not being allowed to read, baby. And that's just, yeah.
So many layers. So, and I believe Sarah on our podcast, she described it as when she's walking down that hallway, looking in all the rooms. She's like, "That's the second most disturbing hallway next to the hallway in The Shining." So,
Yeah, they did Jezebel's really well, and it really showed, I thought too, with Moira and June both talk a lot about choice, and that was something that June thinks about a lot during the book, and they did a good job of showing that conversation of like they blame themselves because they have this tiny sliver of ability to choose something, which isn't, we know as viewers that it's not a true choice, but they
correct.
do, like Gilead forces them to do this, and that's part of the trick, right? It's like, the biggest trick the devil ever pulled is like making you think it's your fault. And that's one of the things about Jezebel's. It's like, oh, okay, pick your poison, and it's, you can have this kind of doom or you can have that kind of doom. And part of Jezebel's is tricking you into thinking you chose this, and oh, here's some, liquor, so be happy with what you chose and numb yourself up. And it's, I think that they portrayed it really well.
I agree. I agree. Um, I thought it was interesting, and I really didn't think about this myself until I was talking on another podcast to the Deviant Women. I'll plug them podcast, which is out of Australia. They're absolutely amazing. And I thought it was interesting. We were talking about Moira and talking about Offred June, and I thought there was an interesting kind of transfer of characteristics between the two of them post Jezebel's, where Moira kind of starts out as the rebellious one who is trying to escape and trying to do anything she can to get out of there and keep everybody kind of moving in that direction. But once she's in Jezebel's, she kind of starts to lose that hope. Whereas at that point, when they meet again, is kind of, I thought, a transfer of power almost, symbolically or not so much, to June, as when I think she kind of discovers, okay, I've tried to manipulate every person I can within this society and the structure that I'm given to get me out of this situation. And now I'm going to have to be the one, including Moira, who she has kind of always relied on to be that person for her and kind of help her be that rebellious. Because she's always kind of been in the back, and Moira has always been the one driving things in that direction. But you kind of see in that scene where they meet, and she's telling her not to let the bastards grind her down, that's kind of the point where her switch goes on. And Moira still has a little bit of, because she does end up escaping. But when you see her, like in the Canada scene, when she finally makes it, that she's just, it's out. She's done. Like she's got nothing left. And like anybody would in that situation. So I thought that was interesting to think about, kind of June taking up that mantle of the rebellious one that's going to make shit happen and figure out a way to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is like what we project on other people. And I think we often think so much higher of our friends than we do of ourselves, and sort of like that imposter syndrome thing that I think particularly women and people of color and women of color feel. And it's like, I think that June had Moira almost like as this emotional talisman in her head. In her mind, it's like, okay, and in the book she talks about this a lot, like, oh well, if Moira here were here, Moira would be saying like, fuck that, and like she'd be fighting back and she'd be doing this and she'd be doing that. And it's like, yeah, Moira would be doing that, but also like in reality, Moira also gets, gets ground down, and like Moira does go through things, and Moira is a real person, and she's not just like this pinnacle of strength all the time. Like she also gets exhausted, and she also needs to make sure she's safe, and like she's not superhuman. And I think that's something that like I see that a lot in activism, is like people sort of project, particularly onto Black women, this idea of like you need to be the strength for all of us, and like you need to carry the weight of the world and the weight of the movement on your shoulders. And it's really unfair. And it's something like, I think that it's good that they sort of showed the vulnerability and the realness of like, yeah, man, Moira got exhausted. And I think that it's also nice that like as women and as friends that they were then able to like share strength. And so like Moira was feeling really low, and I think seeing June did make her feel worse, because it sort of reminded her of like, oh my God, that's what I used to be. And then also like, oh my God, June is like also bucking the system, and maybe that will make it worse. But then in a way it did get into her head, and it reminded her of like who she can be, and it gave her the strength to get out of there. I do
Exactly.
think though that like seeing Moira in Canada, like I know some people are reading it as like she's toast. I actually think that that's temporary. Like I think that
Oh
that
yeah,
is traumatic.
I didn't mean to imply that I thought she was like broken down mentally, like say Janine is sort of. I
Yeah, Janine's on like a long-term care plan, whereas like Moira,
right,
I think Moira is going to be dealing with the effects for a long time, but I think Moira will only be catatonic for like a certain amount of time.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
like
think I
Moira,
think she's suffering
definitely.
from what anyone would suffer from when they'd been in that situation. Jezebel's got enough strength and to escape, and then finally get to a place where someone is actually nice to you for probably the first time, and we don't really know how long, given the fact that the show doesn't give us timelines.
Yeah.
But I thought they did a really great job of just showing what it would be like for someone to come out of, and you would know this better than I, having dealt with people who've been through more traumatic situations, that when you get to a situation where someone is actually treating you like a human being, that it's almost hard to accept that, and emotionally you're so drained, and the effect that that has on you after it's done, that it's really hard to recover from.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how they show Moira next season, and how they show, for one thing, I'm hoping to see some amount of either flashbacks to how she got out, or what I think is really likely is that if June is not going to the eyes, if she's going in a positive way, I don't think June will quickly get out of Gilead. I think we'll be going on a journey through the underground. And I think that's why we didn't see Moira's journey, because we're going to take that journey with June. Um, but I think that then we will see Moira dealing with PTSD and trauma and all those things like on a daily basis, and like living with it in a real way. Because the show does seem to not enjoy, but this show seems to understand the value in, those small moments and those realistic moments of dealing with those things.
Yeah, and I think they've done a really good job of that. Um, so, any other things that stick out in your mind about the last few episodes? Was there anything you didn't like that you wish they would have done differently?
Um, the only other thing that I think really sticks out in my mind is I was really happy that they showed, like with the participation, the culling, they showed someone saying no and what happens, because this whole idea of, oh well, it's up to us what we do, and I actually did see some fans saying like, oh well, they don't actually have to, and I was like, I'm sorry, do you believe them? And there's just like a great line that is often repeated of, if you want to know how someone really treats you, try saying no to them, and see what happens. And whether that's, a romantic partner, a government, what have you, you learn a
Hmm.
lot more by saying no to someone than you do by saying yes to them. And how was it New Ovglen was the first person to step out of line?
Yes, yes, which
Uh,
was interesting. Like we talked about
yeah.
that. Like that was weird that that's the line for her. I mean, because
Yes.
she was just playing the no, you shut up game with June as they were walking down the street, and then all of a sudden she's like, oh no, we can't do this.
Yeah. And the fact that as soon as she said no to taking somebody out, to calling someone, then she was, beaten and taken away. Well, if that's what happens when you don't follow orders, like if you don't do what they were implying you should do, then that means that you were never really free to make a choice in the first place.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I don't think anybody should be under the delusion that any of these people have a choice, even when they feel they have a choice.
right. But so that's the thing, like people do act like they do. And one of the things that I was really happy that I was able to write, and was sort of my culminating piece for Den of Geek about The Handmaid's Tale, was about sort of how the way that Gilead operates is a parallel to the way that coercion within rape and sexual violence operates, which is the most common way, which is not somebody coming up to you with a gun, but which is somebody creating a situation where they wear you down, or where no one, forces you to, but you're in a situation where you basically better say yes, because if you say no, you know what'll happen, which is the entirety of Gilead. That's really how this whole thing goes.
That is a great analogy.
Thank you. I was pretty proud of it.
That's good. No, that's fantastic. I wouldn't have thought to phrase it like that, but I definitely agree with that. I did think it was interesting that they kind of exposed, I guess, a little bit of a flaw in their system, in that once the handmaids get pregnant, they're kind of in a power position, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because obviously they're clearly not going to like what happened at the culling and the salvaging there. But yeah, we talked about it a little bit last night in our wrap-up show. Is that's kind of a little bit of the flaw, is like, okay, you've got these women and you subjugated them and got them to, in this role, but as soon as they get what really you're going for, which is they're pregnant with a healthy child, the power turns. And I don't know that they really thought about that, or maybe they did, and I don't know how they can seem to handle that, especially when someone like June Offred kind of turns it on them and starts using it against them.
Yeah, see, I think that I wonder if that for some of them, they just never assumed that those women actually had power in the first place. Along the same lines of that line, they shouldn't have given us uniforms if they didn't want us to be an army. I don't think that they if you don't see women as being powerful people, you definitely wouldn't see pregnant women as powerful. Like you would think that that's a condition that makes you more weak, that makes you vulnerable. People would not see that as being a place of power. And it's like, no, these are people who can make choices. They can still leave. Like it's not confinement. But if you believe in that, and there are people like, right, in 2017 who think that women should immediately leave the workforce or shouldn't have been in it to begin with, who think that they should not be able to eat or drink anything, never mind just the normal set of things that doctors recommend. There's a lot of people who believe that women's bodies should be restricted in a much more intense way as soon as they're pregnant, or even this whole pre-pregnant thing. Every once in a while, a state will kick out a law saying any woman who could potentially be pregnant shouldn't be allowed to touch alcohol, or otherwise it's a crime, and something like that. And so I could see them just honestly not even viewing pregnant women as strong, when in reality it's like that is that's like a demonstration of the strength of a body, is that it can do this thing. It can literally manufacture human life and support it and create it and bring it about. I mean, that sounds like a pretty strong thing to me.
Absolutely.
But if you don't
seems
see
like
that,
the strongest thing that I think that a human being could do, to be honest with you, if you're putting all the cards on the table, I don't know of a thing that, especially as a man, I will tell you outright, my body does not do anything that could even remotely compare to the process of childbirth and being pregnant. Not even a little bit. Not even if I invented something, it still wouldn't be what that process is. And so I think you're dead on. Like maybe that's a good. I hadn't thought about that, about them not thinking maybe that they had power in the first place because of how they view women. But that's a great thought. The other thing I thought was interesting was they kind of showed that in two ways. One was that way, but also that when the commanders are meeting to decide what to do with Mr. Putnam, I believe is his last name, Janine's former commander, that they kind of get a taste of the wives actually having a little bit of power, because Mrs. Putnam, who we are not really sure what she likes, because she seems not like anything, including the child that she got. But she kind of turned, and we did say that, of all the quote unquote worst possible punishments, losing an arm, I guess, a hand, come on. But you do kind of see Fred kind of get that like light bulb above his head, like, oh, so they do have a little bit of input. And given his current situation, Serena Joy, knowing how Serena Joy is, especially in the current storyline, I think Fred is kind of realizing that he's got two women on his hands that have a lot of power over him in a lot of their own situations that maybe he didn't realize.
Yeah, and it shows how much soft power matters, which I think it's interesting that people are always trying to devalue whatever, if it's associated with women, they'll devalue it. But it's like, you can take away all of the systemic rights and powers that women have, and yet still people will find a way. And it's like they didn't ever mean, I don't think it's written into their law and in their system that like the wife has a voice. And yet it's still just inherently compelling to them that when the wife comes and says, "Oh, I'm concerned for his soul and I just want his soul to be cleansed." And like we honestly don't know enough about that character. Like I don't know if she's actually concerned for his soul or if she's just like real pissed. Like I have a feeling it's the latter, but I
Right.
also feel like she could make a pretty good case for the former too. But because of the way that their society is set up, like she can make a case for that. And even though she doesn't like that power isn't written anywhere into any of their systems, and yet she has it.
Right.
There's always a way, and not to say that like people have power because that has not been granted to them. Like Gilead gets zero credit for that. The sons of Jacob get they get
Yeah, no,
no credit.
you don't get credit for a loophole.
Yeah, but it just speaks to, the intelligence of people like Serena Joy and like, what is she, Mrs. Putnam? Within
Yeah.
that system, who can still go out and find their way. And it's like, even if you think you are, you are the Commander Waterford of this situation and you think that you are the strongest guy on the planet, like there's still a way. Somebody can still put a crack in that. And it's like if you are, leading some sort of really hierarchical, hegemonic system, you still got to watch your back because people are coming for you. Like eventually, that arc of history is long, but it's bending towards justice, and they're coming for you.
Yeah, I thought I mentioned this a couple times when I was talking to the Deviant Women podcast, but I thought what this show did really well was to show a society and a government that in the first few episodes looked like it was very strict and very regimented and very well thought out and very strict in its ideology, obviously, and kind of had its stuff together and had laid this out almost perfectly, they thought, but that ultimately those organizations are all made up of people. And when you have, the human element, no matter how strict your society is, no matter how, thought out the rules are and how regimented and hierarchical, as you said, when you get that human element in there and you start getting people and emotions and everything involved, I think it did a great job of showing, yes, in those first few episodes, we were like, well, how is anybody going to get out of this? Because it looked so strict and like everybody was following along the rules. But as you get through the other episodes, you kind of see the emotions take hold and you kind of see people breaking away from the norms and the laws of Gilead and how that when you have a society that's so strict that it doesn't allow for humanity to have any kind of place in it, that it's eventually going to crumble.
Yeah. Ain't
So,
no power to people. Right?
That's right. So I did have we had a question. We got some questions from the various places of social media. Let me, I know some people were wondering, I think you alluded to this earlier. So you think June is headed somewhere in the underground and we're going to finally see this Handmaid's Underground Railroad type system?
Yeah, I'm hoping that we'll see that. I'm wondering if we will ever see, because we mostly are gonna, it seems like book people and show people will now be on mostly equal footing because the endings really lined up there, which I think will be cool.
Yep.
But I'm wondering if they will take any of the unused material from the book and bring that out. So like June's mom, for example, wouldn't it be cool if she were, say, part of the underground, and then we could take some of that stuff from the book and bring that out into season 2?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think in the book she was, well, at least allegedly, Moira said that she saw her in a video that was from the colonies. So,
Yeah.
but I know Bruce Miller has said that we're going to see some of the colonies next year and explore that stuff that's kind of outside the direct confines of Gilead, which I think will be cool. Um,
Yeah.
so that, yeah, I agree. I think that'll be interesting. And then they've been kind of parsing out a lot of news here lately. I think for the fans that are kind of very eager to get to season 2, that Alexis Bledel is coming back in a quote leading role. So I'm excited for that. I think a lot of people are wondering how, but
Yeah.
but that we'll leave that up to the writers to decide how she.
If they send her to the colonies and they're exploring the colonies, it makes sense for her to lead their colonies storyline, but they also could be doing some other things.
Well, whatever she does, if she does anything remotely as good as what she did this season, then it's really going to matter what they write, because she was amazing, which surprised me because I have not watched her in too much outside of the Gilmore Girls, which is on me, but she really surprised me with the depth of her performance. And also, we're hopefully going to get some more Hannah. I think that kind of thrown in there at the end, we weren't really sure where they're going to go with that from there.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of questions too about like, what's the plan there, guys? What's the plan with when you have those children? Like, what if Hannah ends up being fertile? Or would you actually like, so in theory, whoever, like Commander's wife is raising Hannah as their own child, if Hannah ends up being fertile, would some commander and his wife actually allow her to go and be a handmaid? Like, because we all know that it's not actually that prized of a position, right? Like, would a commander and his wife actually tolerate their child, their daughter that they raise as their own, being sent off to be a handmaid? No way. Like,
right.
No. So then, like,
that's interesting that you thought that that's where she was. So is that the impression that you got in that scene, that she was living with someone? Because we kind of got the impression that it was like a school or facility of sorts.
But they definitely, so when they had the parade of children, when they did the ambassador visit, a bunch of those kids were too old to be, when they said the children of Gilead, my assumption was that they mixed in children who have been born since Gilead started with children appropriated.
Yes, and we talked about that as well, that the people watching don't really have any knowledge beyond what they're rolling out to them. So it's basically all propaganda, so they could roll out whatever age children, and A, they're happy because they're seeing children, but B, they don't know any better. So.
Well, and also, like, I mean, if you're a country, like, you get all the stuff that the country before, like, who you took over. So those are the children of Gilead, and so they've taken them. But if she's going to a school wherever, like, she's living, I assume it's the same as it was in the book, where she's living with a family somewhere. I mean, I don't know if she's at a boarding school or what she is, but I wouldn't be surprised if she has some other parents. That's how it was in the book.
Well, then that makes sense. I mean, obviously she's got to have somebody caring for her. You would hope as much as someone can care for anyone in Gilead.
Yeah.
So I guess my other question, and we'll get to our favorite guy. So did you feel like the Nick situation improved any?
So I did feel like Nick, it's interesting. I was listening to how you all felt about Nick and the pregnancy thing. I felt like Nick was better, and then I listened to all of you get upset, and then I felt like he was worse. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I feel bad because the actor Max Minghella, he is a legitimately good actor, and I just think that because there's so many characters and so many excellently written characters and great performances, that character kind of got pushed to the back a little bit. And they didn't really develop an, other than you find out that he had a brother that was a drug addict. And so that's really kind of impacted the way he handles relationships, which is part of how he is in general. But I didn't really think they wrote enough for him to get into the meat of that. And go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm hoping that season 2 gives him an opportunity to be a more active role and to maybe take some actions when they're not, like, if they go into the underground or if they're escaping in some fashion, then he can actually do things and not be under the watchful eye of a bunch of other people.
Right, because you got to think that his next move would be to try and follow her out of Gilead, because two things. You don't know that, I mean, his job for Serena Joy is done. Like I was under the impression when they had the salvaging that they were going to be stoning Nick because they didn't need him anymore, and Serena Joy wanted to get him out of the picture, which is why she had another driver. That turned out not to be the case, obviously, but also that, you know, in Gilead, you got to look over your shoulder all the time. And I wonder if he's worried that he's next on the block and is obviously wanting to be with the woman who is pregnant with his child. So the logical thing seems that he's going to try and get out.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Madeline? No. Oh yeah, go for it. Sorry. Hello?
Hello.
Sorry. I couldn't tell if I had you on mute or not. I've taken up residence in the office and they needed something from in here. And also,
all good.
the phone was dying, so now I'm on battery, I think. Okay, what were you just saying? Something about Nick.
Oh, the next logical step for Nick is to obviously get out of Gilead, one, because June is pregnant with this child, and he obviously showed some emotion and some attachment to that and got her out of there. So you would think he was going to follow her. And B, he's got to be wondering if Serena Joy is going to, or the commander and Serena Joy are going to have it out for him.
Yeah, so the way that she got into the car, I couldn't tell. It didn't seem like he necessarily, like he definitely didn't get into the van with her, but it sort of left it open that like he may have followed.
Oh, interesting. I
You know,
didn't
I
catch
wouldn't.
that at all. But
he was not like in the back of the van with her.
right.
But if we were to open up on like when she gets out of the van, it turns out he was riding shotgun up front and she had no idea. That wouldn't totally surprise me. Or if when she gets to a safe house a few days down the line, he suddenly appears, like he's several days behind her once he could get away, something like that. That wouldn't surprise me either. But yeah, I've got to imagine that it would not be safe if she's getting away. It would not be safe for him to stay there for very long. So my initial reaction when I saw the episode, to see him be positive about the pregnancy, I thought was a good thing, because often in general, men don't react positively when women tell them they're pregnant. I also felt like it was just sort of what she needed in the moment. I did enjoy how negative she was about the pregnancy to Serena Joy, mostly as a punishment for Serena Joy. It was also nice for for June to have a moment to sort of think about like, well, wait a minute, like how would I feel about this pregnancy if it were not the wacko world of like if it was just me and this person who I actually got pregnant with. Which is obviously like, how do you even do that? That's impossible. But it was kind of nice that second of like him leaning up against her and holding her hand, of like, oh yeah, like these are the two people who actually had this baby, as opposed to the rest of this stuff that's going on revolving around her child. I don't actually think that June genuinely felt that feeling of I prayed to not have a baby, or you think I want her brain, like all that stuff. I don't think she really felt it, but I think she needed to say it in the moment to Serena, because Serena deserved to be told that mean, nasty thing at that moment.
Absolutely.
But I did agree then, listening to the podcast, I want to say, was it Rhea who said something about like, oh, and of course he's like making this about him. As soon as she said it, like, that's totally right. Like he is, of course, once again, nicking it up. But I also like, I don't know, I couldn't help but feel in the moment, like, I don't know, I'm just excited that like for once June has somebody like, just like she can relax for a moment and have someone be nice to her.
Absolutely.
But soon as I saw Serena walk in, I was like, and that's the end of Nick ever driving her anywhere and ever being nice to her and them ever hanging out, and Nick's gonna die. Like, this is the
Well,
end of the good things in their lives.
yeah, as with most the good moments in Gilead on this show, they build you up, give you about 3 seconds of feeling okay, and then they take it away.
Yeah, and I thought it was the fact that she had arranged a separate driver. I don't know that she knew that they were that attached, but I thought that Serena Joy, she knew she was going to take June to see Hannah, and it was like she didn't want even the slightest chance that Nick
Sure.
could spill the location.
Yep.
And she just knew that there would be some amount of house loyalty there, even if she didn't necessarily think. I think that she was surprised to see like that level of tenderness between the two of them, but I think that she assumed there would be some amount of affinity. Um, but I think, yeah, she was probably taken aback a bit. But oh, Nick, I hope that, I don't know. I want him to be so much more.
I think everybody does, and that's what I hope for. And, I know we do give the character a lot of crap, but
Yeah.
yeah, we hope for better things for Nick, and we'll see where that leads us.
And I want to see Luke, like, I want to see Luke take care of Moira. Like, Moira deserves to put up her feet and relax and be taken care of.
Well,
Like,
I will say that it's funny that you phrase it that way because Luke's famous line was, "I'll take care of you." So
right?
now he's got somebody to take care of. On top of, let's not forget, whatever the blonde lady's name is that ended up in Canada with him. So yeah,
I feel very much like if Luke is not already in a relationship with that woman, he's definitely like at least has feelings for that woman. I feel like there's something going on there, which is fine.
you would think so. It's just human nature, especially. I think
Yeah.
it was 3 years that it had been. Is that what it was when they did the?
I feel like they got something going on.
Oh yeah, I don't know how you couldn't in that situation if you think your wife is dead and you're living in little America in Canada with the only person that you've really got a connection with.
I want to see Moira's facial reactions. Like, I just want to see her make faces at him and react to all of the things in his life and just not say anything, but just make faces at him like, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the future for the show definitely holds a lot of promise. I thought they wrapped it up about as well as they could have in that they gave us an ending that I think the people who are book loyalists and the people who haven't seen the show can both come down on common ground on. But also that they gave you Moira back and kind of gave you a future with Moira. But they also took Ovglin away, and you don't really know anything that's happened to her. So there's kind of that string left out there. Janine is still alive.
Yeah.
And the commander and Serena Joy are kind of left wondering what the hell just happened because our woman who is, pregnant with not our child, but the child that was going to be ours is gone. And so there's so many ways that they can go. I thought it was an excellent ending, in my opinion.
Yeah. Wondering with Lydia, Aunt Lydia, I honestly feel like that, I mean, she clearly was not happy to be bringing Janine to them. And I do think she was a true believer in a way that Serena Joy never was. I think Serena Joy is much more of a pragmatist, and I think that was really shown at the Mexican trade dinner. And I think Lydia is loyal to her girls and loyal to the cause, and like really believes in some of the rhetoric that they espouse that they just like made up in the back of a limousine one day. And so I think it really messed with Lydia in a big way, and I'm excited to see the fallout from that. And I want to see how that's what happens when you mess with a true believer, is like like, whereas Serena Joy would never be thrown by that same, like if that set of events had happened with Serena Joy in the place of Lydia, it wouldn't be a problem.
Right. Well, and again, I think that speaks to and I talked about this the other night as well. The aunts are supposed to be like this drill sergeant, strict as they come, hardliners of this society, because they're the ones that have to prepare these women for this role that they're going to have. And it just, again, shows you what happens when a little bit of that humanity creeps into a person that is not supposed to have any in her role in the society. And it's just impossible to live up to those standards and the way that they've structured things.
Well, and that's what they get too for hanging this ideology on religion, right? Because that comes down to this whole thing of allegedly, what they really wanted was to just be fascists, right? And they insisted on building it around this religious thing. But it's not really about religion, because if it were really about religion, then when Lydia said, well, they've been forgiven, they paid their penance, like, then that would be enough. If it was truly about the religion, then when all of these things happened about forgiveness and like that, the hardliners like that would be considered acceptable. But that's not what it comes down to. Like, there were a bunch of people who had these ideas, and then they found an ideology to build around it and to like say, oh, this will work. And this will win over certain people, and this will make people agree with our cause because they already have, this is familiar to them, and they like this particular religion. It's very popular. Christianity is found in a lot of places, and we'll get a bunch more people to our side if we use these very familiar terms. But it's all BS. Like, they really just wanted to be fascist dictators.
Indeed. Absolutely. So, do you have any other thoughts or feelings, conclusions on the show?
I think the purge is coming for Commander Waterford. I think it's
really
coming. Well, in the book there was a serious purge, and that dude looked real lonely when he said, I don't think that we need to really be looking for I think we can just forgive him. We all have a lot of work to do. Nobody's
it's cool, guys.
Right? And
I love that scene. He was just like drinking his drink and like, it's cool, guys. Everybody's got their things, and everybody's like, not so much, Fred.
Like, Fred, we all cleaned up our act while you weren't looking. And he's like, oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So you wonder if this is the third strike for Fred. Especially now that once they find out that his handmaid that actually got pregnant is on the move. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that does fall on his head, because, ultimately he's the man and he's supposed to be the one who.
Oh, Rita. I want to see Rita get radicalized.
Yeah, you know what? Briefly, that character I thought she was great, the actress that played her, but I was really kind of confounded by that character as to whether she was a believer and like was really into it, because they don't really give you much other to go on with her. Like, Tiana made the point. I was like, well, she's always so happy, like when they think June is pregnant a couple times. And Tiana was like, well, that's probably because she's tired of doing all this stuff and would really love for a baby to be in the house so she could actually do something. And so I could never tell if her character was like someone who prior to the regime bought in and was like part of that. But I wouldn't think so. She was a Martha, but then talks about her son dying in the war, but not specifically saying which side.
The other thing that I thought I saw, and I don't know, I haven't seen anyone else talk about this, so I don't know if I hallucinated it, but I thought when they took the previous handmaid down, I thought what she was hung by, I thought it looked like the color of the Martha's uniform.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I thought that perhaps they had become close, and then she used that, and then she felt really guilty, and that's part of why she was extra cold to June, was that she was trying to keep her distance because she felt so guilty that something from her was used, and like, oh, if she, if I hadn't let my guard down, kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah. I'll have to go back and watch it to see that.
I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, so I feel like if it was that subtle, maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I thought that the piece of fabric looked like sort of that olive drab color that she uses, and I thought, oh, she's been burned, and so she was just so heartbroken that she felt guilty, even though it wasn't her fault. She felt like it was her fault.
Interesting. Yeah, so that was kind of the only other one that I couldn't get a full read on, but everybody else I thought they fleshed out good, except for our obvious Nick issues that we've beaten into the ground. So I think we're looking forward to season 2, and we're gonna try and keep in touch with you, because I love talking to you, and I love the things that you have going on, and hopefully when we talk again, your podcast will be off the ground, and what you're doing right now with the Health for the Homeless is going very well and continues to be a good thing for you. And I just love all the work that you do and how passionate you are about it. And I love it all. So I'm going to definitely try and keep in touch with you as long as you will have us to continue to keep in touch with.
Happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, that was Delia Harrington on the Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. Any final words, Delia, about anything else you'd like to share with us before we end this interview?
No, I think that's it. I'm looking forward to season 2.
Excellent. All right. Well, we will talk again, I'm sure. Thank you again for joining us. This is Justin from Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. Have a good one. See you. All right.